Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Sonic 3D Blast. In the last part we went through Rusty Ruin Zone and all that it entailed, and now we're going to do the same for Spring Stadium. As the name would somewhat imply, this is this game's equivalent to Spring Yard from Sonic 1. A whole lot of bouncer plates, a whole lot of bumpers you'll bounce around off of. It's the carnival zone, so to speak. With that said, it's my least favorite just because I don't like this kind of mechanic for platformers. I don't like the bouncy areas too much usually. Collision Chaos comes to mind from Sonic CD and how much I do not like that zone. But compared to some of the other ones of this mechanic, it's not too bad. To quote its bio from the Saturn manual, this area is a crazy funhouse of pinball cushions and bumpers, springs, and not-so-friendly spike traps. Hone your jumping and bouncing skills here. Alright. This is also where I feel they like to use slopes the most in the game. Not that that really matters too much for a game like this, but oh well. Now, I mentioned last part that there exists a particular ROM hack of this game by the founder of Traveler's Tales, John Burton. And in between parts, I decided to research that a bit more so I can actually get a list of what it changed for the game so I can compare it to the actual game. Note, I am reading this basically not verbatim off Sonic Retro, but all the information I'm saying here you can find on there, no problem. The fan patch, which is called Sonic 3D Director's Cut, was released back in 2017 as a part of, at least through a beta of it, the Sonic hacking contest that year. As for what it did, let's start with the tweaks it did to the main game. Sonic now moves faster and turns more sharply, meaning he controls a bit closer to the mainline titles. The camera now moves a bit forward when you're traveling at high speed, so you don't get blindsided as much, kind of like when you super peel out in Sonic CD. Running into walls no longer cancels your momentum, so it no longer just feels iffy on that perspective. When you get hit, you only lose one Flicky at a time instead of however many you have, as long as you have one ring. If you have no rings and you get hit, you do drop all your Flickies, though. With that said, Flickies do count as a shield in that regard, because if you have 0 rings but get hit, you don't die, you just lose your Flickies. And because of that, Flickies now also act as shields against projectiles. Whenever you get Speed Shoes, Sonic is now pseudo-invincible, in that he basically just gets bounced back. He doesn't lose any rings or anything, making the Power Sneakers slash Speed Shoes actually useful in that version of the game, frankly speaking. During boss fights, the camera is adjusted so that it tries to show you and Eggman simultaneously instead of just focusing on you, which is a very minor fix, but hey, it makes the bosses more approachable, honestly. Sonic medals, the things that if you get 10 of, they give you a continue in this game, are tweaked to instead be part of the completion percentage of the game. Basically, in order to get 100%, they now count for that, so to speak. More on why that is in a moment. In terms of Chaos Emeralds, that version tweaks the game to work closer to Sega Saturn and PC versions of the game, in that you can only get 1 Chaos Emerald at a time, no 2 per act sort of thing, but you can also only get 1 per zone, so you can only get 1 Chaos Emerald in all of Green Grove. And to compensate for that, the final 2 zones in this game in particular don't have Chaos Emeralds you can get, so they actually added Tails and Knuckles to those stages. There's also certain things that just had minor tweaks, like bigger or smaller hitboxes when need be. There are slight graphical tweaks. For instance, if you lose a Flicky, its icon will bounce in the bottom right to tell you that one's the one that's lost, and you can try to look for it. Flashing Flicky icons now appear on the sides of the screen to direct the player towards any loose Flickies as it is. For some reason, Green Grove's color palette was adjusted to look more like Green Hill. But then you get into straight-up new features. The game has a proper world map that I think is based off the one you see between stages in the Saturn version that we see at the beginning of every part. Allowing the player to choose the level as they progress, kind of like Sonic Chaotic, or Knuckles Chaotix, or Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2. They straight up added Supersonic, which another ROM hack did as well, where when you get all 7 Chaos Emeralds and have over 50 rings, press jump and press the spin dash button to transform. Supersonic is just a straight-up combination of the Speed Shoes, Invincibility power-up, and the Yellow Shield's homing attack, though. There's a time challenge mode where there are no Flickies, just go straight through the stages like it's a classic Sonic game, which, admittedly, kind of a fun way to play the game, albeit you still need to keep in mind this game's level design's a bit wacky in that regard. The game now has a password system in that director's cut, which, yeah, I probably should mention. If you get a game over and restart the game here, you have to start all the way from the beginning. There are no save files at all. I believe that password system is a remnant from a Sega Channel version of this game, which I believe I've talked about the Sega Channel briefly before, back when I did Wily Wars. The Sega Channel was essentially the Satellaview / pay-per-view gaming for the Sega. You could hook it up to your cable box and get certain game demos, certain versions of certain games had minor tweaks to them, all for one sort of flat rate. It was weird. And there's a straight-up completion marking on the world map as well, 100%. To achieve that, you need to complete all zones, get the time challenge for every act done, collect every Sonic medal in every stage, get all the Chaos Emerald, and probably the weirdest thing, get a complete total score of 5 million, which, odd. If you're going to play the game nowadays and you don't want all the shiny extras from the Saturn version, be it the different graphics or the better bonus stages, I feel, the director's cut is definitely the way to play the game. With that said, it's still Sonic 3D Blast at the end of the day. Even with the minor control tweaks, it still functions a bit oddly in that it doesn't feel like what a Sonic game should. It's just closer to what a Sonic game should, if that makes sense. So if you're of the kind who wants to get into the game, that's probably the version I would recommend nowadays. Now, I'm trying to remember exactly when I first played this game. I want to say I'm someone who got introduced to this through the Mega Collection on GameCube. That sounds about right, and I remember getting relatively far in it back when. I think even on my first playthrough I got maybe to the next zone after that, without getting a game over. But even back then, I thought, this is neat, but I don't like the Flicky system. And yeah, that about sums it up. I do find it strange, though, that from memory, the Saturn version was never ported to anything else, kind of like the Sega Saturn version of Mega Man 8 or Symphony of the Night. In that, there are some neat extras here, so why not give us this one as well on future ports or collections and all that jazz? Although, I have heard that the reason some Saturn versions of games haven't been ported to like Virtual Consoles or Steam or all that is, since the Sega Saturn was a bit of a hard console to program for, given it used, I think, squares instead of triangles for its polygons, that programming an emulator for it is also a bit of a task and a half, so they might not want to put that much effort in for something that might not sell too well. But honestly, for games that are beloved as much as like Symphony of the Night and Mega Man 8, as I mentioned before, for example, I feel it would be potentially worth the investment just because I think people want to check out the new content they haven't really seen before. Be it the Woodman and Cutman boss fights in Mega Man 8, the new music, the new weapons and items in Symphony of the Night, all that jazz. And if I'm recalling correctly, I recall seeing a figure somewhere over the years that the Saturn version of 3D Blast in particular was like the second best-selling game of the platform. Only behind, like, Nights into Dreams in the US, I believe. Obviously, Japan probably had very different sales figures, given that all the good RPGs on the system were released only in that region, as well as certain dating sims. Tokimeki Memorial comes to mind. So I just really wish we got more Saturn games re-released. There's some cool stuff on this system, same with the Dreamcast, but not much of it gets a lot of modern ports or love. Hell, a game I'm going to be doing an LP of very soon. Not exactly a good game, but I feel given games like Fatal Frame and Echo Knight got re-releases on like PSN and such, I could totally dig a PSN version of the game I'm thinking of right now. Oh, I forget if I went to go show them off. Oh, I know, here I am. You may have seen it right then, but this is officially the level where they gave up with hiding these two. Nails and Tuckles, huh? Knuckles and Tails are right next to each other, which honestly makes it probably one of the more annoying levels to get both Chaos Emeralds in at once if you're doing that in the Sega Genesis version, as it's kind of hard to get 50 rings, use them all up, and then find another 50 rings immediately in this stage. With that said, if memory serves, this is stage 6. So this will actually be the last special stage I do for a couple of stages now, as I want to get to the 7th Chaos Emerald as late as I possibly can, just for the sake of me going to get the bad ending first in the game to show it off. So we're not going to be seeing another special stage probably until late next part, if memory serves. I can't quite recall because... Actually, you may know it had to be late next part because the final part is just the final stages. Never mind. Honestly, I feel the Saturn version of this game being ported to, like, modern virtual console stuff, so to speak, even though obviously they don't use that name for it much anymore, would be worth it just for these special stages, because honestly, these are the best special stages 3D Blast ever had, because the Genesis ones are too easy to be interesting. The PC version obviously is aesthetically based off this, but it shares the difficulty of the Genesis version, plus the sprite work and audio is just not the best in that. This feels like a special stage that has a soul, so to put it, even if it is just the half pipe again, although at this point in time, this is probably only, what, the second, third, maybe fourth time at most we saw the half pipe special stage used in a Sonic game. We weren't tired of it back then. Nowadays, very different topic. Mind you, I recall seeing some very differing opinions on these special stages over the years. I recall a lot of people back when I first learned about the Saturn version saying that these were probably some of the hardest version of the half pipes. I don't see it, I'll be frank. I don't really understand people seeing these special stages as hard, especially compared to the Sonic 2 version, because the Sonic 2 special stages, those can get pretty ridiculous by the end game in terms of either the amount of rings they want you to nab, relative to the amount in the stage, or the amount of hazards they throw at you. Mind you, it's also like Sonic 2 was the first time they did the half pipe, so difficulty consistency was a little bit harder to judge in that regard. Either way, Spring Stadium doesn't really have too much in terms of annoying enemies. This is probably one of the few stages, I know I'm getting into this really late into them, where the biggest annoyance is actually in the hazards in the stage. The bouncing pads aren't too annoying. What is, though, are the bumpers in certain cases like this, and the spikes. Not so much the spike platforms that come out when you stand on them like these ones. Instead, there are at times pretty well masked holes between the patterns and, or the panels in the floor that if you stand on them, well, a spike comes out and stabs you. And they can be pretty hard to see, at least in the Saturn version. In the Genesis version, they stand out a bit more, of course, just due to the lower detail on the panels. But it is one of those things where more detail, unfortunately, makes the level design a bit harder to judge. Also, musically speaking, this is probably one of the few zones I outright prefer the Genesis version song to, because this just sounds too generic, circusy. And there's not a problem with that kind of music in general for use, but it's one of those aesthetics in music, I don't think that's the right term for that, but, oh well, archetypes maybe, that shows up so often that it all starts to sound samey after a while. I can think of certain levels in, for instance, Ep.3 comes to mind, where there's versions of this music I like, but I'm just super used to hearing it. I haven't played Ape Escape in a while. I need to get to doing an LP of the first one at some point, because I do love that series. And it's one of those series I wish got more love nowadays, but by the looks, Sony Japan, in terms of like the actual studio itself, is either being gutted or everyone's leaving and joining other Sony studios anyway. So, a little bit lost in that regard, unfortunate. Here's hoping we can get another game someday. These are the spikes I'm talking about, by the way. These are placed in a really unfortunate spot. So is that one clam enemy. So if you get hit here and lose your flickies, you're gonna be in some deep shit, to be frank. That's one thing, again, the director's cut technically fixes because you only lose one flicky at a time. But at the end of the day, I died there, so I had to come back here. Oh, well. Time for the boss fight of this stage. And I should also mention, a little bit of an odd legacy thing with 3D Blast is there is a different boss theme present in the beta for the game. If I remember to get a link, I'll post it in the description below to like an OST video of it. In the beta version of the game, the boss theme was completely different, and it would later be reused in Sonic 4 Episode 1. Either way, Spring Stadium's boss is probably the most direct boss in the game. Eggman's got some grabby hands with spikes on them. He'll float around, occasionally lowering himself down to try and punch you with them. When he's lowered down, jump into him. That's all he does. Watch out for the spike platforms, particularly around the center of the room, because it is possible for you to get some momentum and jump off the very top of the hill in the center to hit him early. But given his rate of movement and the iffy hitboxes, it's probably not the most worth doing. The bosses in this game aren't exactly hard. If there's any difficulty to them, barring maybe the final 2 boss fights, it's mostly just due to some hitbox shenanigans, to be frank. At the end of the day, though, if you can master this hitboxes, you shouldn't have much of a problem at all with most of the boss fights. If anything, in this stage in particular, the hazards are more dangerous than the boss himself. Also, some bosses might have a bit too much HP for my own tastes, but I can't tell if that's just because the general approach to these boss fights is slower than, say, main Sonic games. It's a bit iffy. It's one of those cases where you can't tell if the length of certain objectives in the game are due to Sonic actively being slower, things actively being longer in design, or the different tone of the game, so to speak, making it feel longer. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, probably more progress through the game than the rest of the LP. See you guys then!